I do want to touch on the Swarthmore 9, but I also wanted to dive into some work that DSA Delco is doing and get your thoughts on some local stuff going on. You have a huge, huge, very extensive resume doing civic engagement work. Now that the primary is over, what are you working on now?
Well, right now, our DSA, Delco DSA, we're focused on one Pride's coming up. So we're going to be in the Delco Pride Parade and at the community, what is it called? Resource Festival, I think they call it. So that's pretty exciting. I'm close friends with Kyle McIntyre, who runs Delco Pride and whatnot. And I've always ever just been an observer since they started doing it. So it's cool to actually be a part of it in that sort of
They
way.
started it, what, 2 years ago?
I think it might be it hasn't been around that long. I don't remember when it started. I think after COVID, like maybe 2021, 22, which feels like it should be 2 years ago, but it is, yeah.
And I
And
mean,
then oh,
so
sorry.
I know that they're organizing or they're doing an event, a Pride event in Media Courthouse, and then they're also doing one in Upper Darby. Are you going to be at the one in Upper Darby or just the one in Media?
We're gonna be at both. We're gonna be in the one in media is just like a parade, really, which is very on brand for media. They love their parades. Any reason to block State Street. And then we're going to be at the resource thing in Upper Darby. That one's more focused on connecting community members with community groups. And I think that one's the more, I guess you could say, useful one. But
And the
I
Upper
mean,
Darby
they
one's
both have their
after
use.
the
Yeah.
Media one?
I believe it's the following weekend. Yes.
Got it.
And they both have their use. I think that there's something revolutionary in having joy and celebrating identities in these sort of trying times. Uh, but, connecting people to resources is a lot more practical. And speaking of the Swarthmore 9, we're going to definitely have some literature there about their case.
Yeah, walk me through kind of, I guess, DSA Delco's involvement with Swarthmore 9. When did the branch get involved and what does the support actually look like in practice?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when I first got involved with Delco DSA, and I knew I wanted to run for leadership as co-chair, and I was thinking about well, what do I want to do with this? And this is around the time that the encampments were actually going on. And I think we had our first meeting like a month or so after they were broken up by the police or or the campus security or whatever, the Swarthmore Gestapo. And I saw that and I was thinking, well, that could have maybe gone differently. And my reason, and this is me coming from a professional background of working with statewide coalitions. I worked for the Asian American Community Fund, which has the Asian American Power Caucus, which is comprised of a bunch of different groups and civic groups throughout Pennsylvania, where they share resources and kind of strengthen each other. So I was coming out of that mentality, and I saw what was happening to the Students for Justice in Palestine at Swarthmore, and I was like, well, this really shouldn't happen to I don't want to see this happen to any other civic group, any other sort of activist group in Delaware County. We really have to have a coalition, a united front, which is what I call this sort of monthly meeting of various different nonprofits and civic groups in Delaware County, hosted by Kyle McIntyre's UDTJ group, which has had mixed results in terms of attendance. But the main idea is that we can't allow any sort of group to be left alone like that and isolated in the community. So the Swarthmore Students for Justice in Palestine and the whole thing with the Swarthmore 9 was a direct inspiration for me. So I tried reaching out to them immediately after that happened.
The school or the group?
The group, through connections I had through a couple of Palestinian activists from Philadelphia. They said, oh, if you're going to be active in Delaware County and stuff, you might want to get in touch with these guys. And it was kind of radio silence, which was kind of understandable because it was kind of a chaotic thing. So I just kind of moved forward without them. I mean, they always had an invitation to join the United Front, but we just kind of moved on without them and did stuff. And this last month, I got a well, I think my first encounter with them where I've actually communicated with them, we were at the No Kings thing in media, and one of our members is a faculty member at Swarthmore and was with one of the Students for Justice of Palestine people,
It's
and they came up
interesting.
to us. Yeah, yes. And they were handing out information about their case, and they came up to us and they're, greeting and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been trying to talk to you guys for about a year now. It's so cool to finally connect with you guys. We should be in touch, like and organizing, especially they have school, we have work and whatnot. So it takes a little while for it to happen. But about like last month, they reach out and they say, hey, we want to get in touch. We have this case going on. Do you think you can maybe help us out? And I got to talking to some of their leaders and whatnot. And it was a bit of an exchange. They explained what was going on their end. And then from me, particularly, they wanted to know about the landscape, the political landscape and the judicial landscape of Delaware County, because a lot of them are, they're transplants. They're not from around here, which is also the case for a lot of our members in Delco DSA, which is another reason why I was so determined to have leadership in the branch because, not to be a Delco, elitist or snob, but it has its own unique quality. I mean, this, you run a page called Delco Rising. It has its own unique quality and history that I think a lot of people around here guard very closely. And they kind of purity test it. So I was able to, explain to them. They were like, well, how does the average Delco citizen feel about Swarthmore College? I was like, well, they probably don't think about it very much. And if they do, it's probably negative. A Swarthmore as a whole, it's probably negative. And they're like, oh, why? And I'm like, well, depending on who they are and, where they get their information from, most common things you'll hear is they ruined the blue route. They have that annoying roundabout, and if they're somewhat a little bit more informed, they'll probably mention, and I mention this all the time, that Swarthmore College pays less per dollar in taxes than the average resident of Delaware County. And that Swarthmore as a whole is a bunch of hippies and sort of rich liberals out of touch. And there's some truth to that for sure. I mean, I would be lying if I said I don't, occasionally, I get my hair cut in that neighborhood and walk around and be like, geez, some of these houses, especially since it's so close. And I live in media and I think about this a lot. So close to Chester City and
Yeah,
places
how far
that
away from
are
Widener is it? Like 5 minutes?
not, yeah, if anything, Southern Delco and is pretty close knit. I mean, I often think about how big Delco is and also how small Delco is. The places where people actually live is actually pretty small, but like size wise, it's pretty big. So they were very interested in like hearing about like, what the people in Delco would think about their case and how they can like best message around that, as well as like wanting to know connections in media and political leadership in Delaware County. And I'm not the most connected person, but I got you involved with them in trying to get some traction with the Delco Times.
Which was a fantastic conversation with Jace, by the way.
Yeah, I read that article. That was great. I did notice you had one comment saying this is biased and did not fact checked. And I was like, well, I didn't want to make an account and comment against that, but it was just like, well, Nick isn't a journalist.
Yeah, I don't pretend to be like some investigative reporter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's trying to get them in touch with, other people and groups in Delaware County. And I basically, I explained that like, I've been wanting to get you guys involved with the broader fabric of organizing in Delaware County for a while now. And I got them involved with UDTJ, and Kyle's been really helpful with them as well. And I joked. I said, well, from now on, you guys are a part of Delco. There's no more of this sort of separate, removing the separation between what goes on at Swarthmore College and the rest of the community will be, is vital to make sure that, no one is left out from this sort of network of people who care. Because one, I think in the case of the Students for Justice in Palestine, I don't know if there's any Delco specific polls that have come out, but on average, most people now are sympathetic to their cause.
And increasingly more so.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Israel acts more and more belligerently and whatnot, and the conditions here get worse as we send more resources over there.
Belligerent was putting it lightly.
Genocidal, yeah. But making sure that that has a space here in Delaware County, I think, is important.
Totally. I heard a lot of noise around the whole Swarthmore case, and a lot of people were spewing nonsense like it's a campus issue, like you shouldn't have any sort of say in it. Why is it important for organizations like DSA to take a stand on this?
Well, one, when it comes to anything freedom of speech related, I think that it's important for any sort of civically involved group to take a stand. Two, for DSA in particular, I had this conversation a lot with some of them as I'm getting more involved with the Democratic establishment here and communicating with them. And a lot of them are like, well, why, I don't understand why it needs to be so divided. I'm like, well, you have to draw a line somewhere. The line has to be somewhere. And for DSA, one of our lines is genocide. We just can't, that we just can't abide by that. That's just like, I wish that was more people's lines, but
It seems like the bare minimum, no?
you would think, you would think. So I forget where I was going with that. What was the original question?
No, you were just talking about the involvement and why it's important for organizations
Yeah, yeah,
and advocacy groups to, take it on.
yeah, exactly. And in terms of it being a campus problem, there is some truth to that. But my rebuttal would be if it's just a campus problem, then why are they being charged by the district attorney's office?
Good point.
If they want to handle it internally, I don't necessarily agree with them stymieing their free speech of their students, especially given their history as a Quaker institution. They're supposed to be super liberal, activist hippie types. But if they wanted to handle it just internally, then, I think that would be one thing. But they're trying to charge them with something that could and them with a year in prison. That's, if they want to, yeah. So I would
And
say, yeah,
how much of that pressure do you think is coming from the federal level?
I don't think very much. From what I understand, the situation is that the previous DA uh kind of just, did the flip. He ran very progressively, and then he ended up taking just like a hardline stance on a lot of stuff, and then he's out, and the new person,
Mouse.
yeah, I'm just curious as to why he would want to inherit like the problems caused by the previous Stolsteimer, or whatever his name is.
I like Stolmeyer better.
What was the thing? The Burgermeister,
Well,
Meisterberg.
well, well, Rouse, he could literally drop these charges tomorrow. What's the path to actually getting him there?
I think, public political pressure, letting him know that this is like, it's probably not the best idea to just continue on with what your predecessor was doing, especially since your predecessor left relatively disgraced.
One quick thing though, you say a lot of like just grassroots pressure in general. What does that like specifically mean?
Well, I believe, and I don't want to speak too much on, I don't want to step on SJP's toes, that they have like a petition set up for contacting the DA's office saying like this many people think these charges should be dropped. Speaking at county level meetings, like, we were both there at the
Yeah.
county council meeting, asking, the people that are the DA's peers, political peers, to make statements would be helpful. And particularly for the residents of Swarthmore, they have a lot of control over their narrative in terms of them speaking at their own municipal meetings. It's hard because, while we could, the average person from anywhere in Delco can attend a meeting in Swarthmore, only Swarthmore residents have a right to speak at them. And I would need to look more into the exact relationship between the college and the town itself. Like, what does that relationship look like? I don't know who. I would argue probably the college has a lot more power in this sort of situation
I'm
than the
sure.
town does. But having voices, uplifting voices in those sort of situations. Maybe if you can't speak, if a resident there speaks on the SWAT nine's behalf and they can, clap along and stuff, just let it know. And a lot of these meetings are very ill attended. So having a large showing in any sort of capacity sends a message. And that goes the same thing for county council meetings. Um, they not often well attended, and when they are, it's usually a big deal.
I went to the one last night. Dude, I was soaked.
How many people were there?
6.
Did Chuckles make his appearance?
He made his appearance, and then he went quickly right to Upper Darby.
Yeah, that's what he's been doing from what I've been
Yeah.
seeing. Wow.
Yeah,
Because
how
Upper
does he make it?
Darby,
How does he make it so quick?
I have no idea, and I also think it's
It's like a
crazy that
magician. He just like pops there. It's wild.
out of breath, you're like, like he's walking in to make an objection at a wedding. Yeah, that's another thing. It's crazy. I said that like only Swarthmore residents can speak at their meetings, and I don't even necessarily know if that's true. That's intuitively true, but I know in the case of Upper Darby, it's in their like the way that they have their constitution written is that their charter or whatever written is that anybody can speak at those meetings, which I think is ridiculous.
So you could come from like Florida and speak.
Yes, you could. Yeah, that's because in like the instance of Charlie, he's not actually from, as he always tells you, he's from the mean streets of Broomall with his
I mean,
mansion with chickens.
yeah, that county council meeting that you went to 2 weeks ago was crazy. I can't believe Womack's like he didn't even engage. He just pivoted to officers week. That was unbelievable.
That's very on brand for him. That's very on brand for the council in general.
Yeah.
No matter who's talking, their eyes will just kind of, okay, I don't want to say all of them, but a vast majority of them will just glaze over while you speak.
Glaze. Yes.
I do have to say that Dr. Taylor is usually pretty attentive, especially when you're speaking about
Agreed.
something like substantive. She'll like perk up and like, look you in the eye, which is nice.
Agreed.
But if she's also looking down and not paying attention, that's how you can kind of tell that you're not saying anything
Yes. Very true.
worth hearing. So
Have any of the council members spoken to you privately, Ruth or Schaefer, any of them?
Yeah, we've spoken to Ruther before. She's
Specifically regarding the Swarthmore 9 case.
oh no, not to the Swarthmore 9. Not yet, at least.
What's your read on why? Like, why won't they talk about the case, touch the case? What do you think
Probably
it is?
the same reason that they won't talk about any case. I feel like they already have a lot on their plate in terms of like the public being annoyed with them. And technically it's not their purview. The judicial
But
system
they still
is,
have power and influence.
yeah. Well, that's my argument to them is that like, their voices still matter. Like in the instance of the was it the Crozier 8 where they had a similar situation. Their rebuttal to my speech basically asking for the same thing was that that's not their place to say anything, it's a different, branch of the government. However, I feel like behind closed doors somebody must have said something because those charges were dropped. This is a little different though, because I would say that Swarthmore College has a bit more political clout than like Prospect Medical Holdings probably
Yeah, of
does at
course.
this point. I think they just play it cautiously because they just don't want to take on more than they already have going on, which is understandable. But it's also understandable for your people to the citizens that help voted them in to try to do the right thing.
What's the relationship between DSA Delco and the actual party in the county?
Right now, I mean, there's no unification in Delaware County, so it goes by municipality and different committees. I think that from what I understand, there's lots of people who are worried about our involvement in terms of, us as an outside force applying like pressure from, some sort of scary national organization, you know, muddying the waters of local politics. And then there's some who think that, oh, this is great. This is the energy that we need to reinvigorate the party, especially moving forward to November this year and eventually, the presidential elections.
DSA Delco took a hiatus though, right? It wasn't around for a long period of time until you started it back up.
Yeah. So I think it was around in like, 2020 and kind of fizzled out. What was I doing in 2020? I was in college. I
2020 was
was
a blur, man.
yeah. Yeah, I had my Zoom graduation. Yeah, I think that, I don't even know if another pandemic were to happen now, I'm not sure how many political organizations could survive that sort of setup, because I'm very firm that we need to have in-person meetings, because I think Zoom meetings are awful. Like even this conversation right now, I would much rather prefer to have it in
For
person.
sure. Agreed.
Um, Right now, I don't know where to look. I'm just looking off in the distance. It'd be a lot more
I know you
natural if
got the
I
camera here, you here.
yeah. So yeah, my whole thing with the Democratic Party and our approach to it is that we are going to drag them kicking and screaming to victory. That we are not enemies of them. We would prefer to work with them where we can. But if they make a move that we necessarily don't agree with, we will do what we can to try and redirect their course to what we think would be best. And it's not always necessarily ideological. Sometimes it's like a more practical methodology sort of question. I really don't want Delco DSA to just be seen as disruptors. I want us to be like a part of the social political fabric of Delaware County, because I think that's what will long term help secure the progressive movement here in Delaware County. I'm not necessarily, I'm not under the illusion that we're going to have socialism in one county. But the broader progressive movement should become a staple here, because sometimes they say like after years and years and years, it finally flipped blue. Now that it's blue, we have to drag it to the left. And you can kind of see the cracks, especially in this primary the other day. They're getting comfortable, and that's dangerous. When Democrats get comfortable, Republicans win.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that they stay on their toes. And they may not necessarily appreciate it. And I'm sure there's forces within the party that think that we represent something antithetical to what they stand for. But I think on average, regular people like what we talk about. I've never had a bad experience with a regular denizen of Delaware County while representing the DSA. I have had negative situations with leadership within the Democratic Party, though. So, yeah.
So, I mean, DSA has a national umbrella. And I know you told me before that they give a lot of autonomy to the local chapters, which I would think would create fragmentation. Your branch's current priorities, I think you said, are septic cuts, housing justice, Crozier healthcare crisis, Swarthmore 9. How does the branch actually decide what to take on?
So, I think it's important to note that the difference between a branch and a chapter. So, Delco DSA is a branch. It's a part of the Philadelphia DSA chapter. The way that it is sort of set up, I understand why you would think that the fragmentation would be bad, but I think in terms of playing the long game, having more localized sort of focused, cells, I guess I don't necessarily like the militancy of that word, but sort of these localized groups, community organizations is better, because, there's something very Marxist about it, in the idea that you have to react to these material conditions that are around. And to say that material conditions from one area of the country to the other are exactly the same, I think is incorrect. They're broadly the same in the fact that we all live under, neoliberal capitalism. But the specific needs and wants, I think, should be what drives local change. There's almost like a sense of self-determination in that the people of an area know best as to what their issues are and what needs to be changed. And I appreciate that, because at this point, I wouldn't say national politics is dead for the left, but it's just not the path that I think we should be focusing on. Uh, you
Seems
know,
inefficient.
it is very inefficient. It's costly. And it's one of those things where, if you go for the crown, you best not miss, sort of thing. And I don't like losing. Having a national, sort of thing where we constantly fall on our face is bad for multiple reasons. Not the least of which is morale. Constantly losing elections. Bernie's two presidential bids and losses were, I think, devastating for the movement. At least for me, so, I had, thought like, okay, we had to focus smaller. And for a while, I was not really even interested in the DSA or any other sort of left wing organization because I thought they focused too much on federal politics, where there is the most amount of resistance to any sort of change. Whereas with local politics, a lot of local politics is non ideological and it's relationship driven. And I feel that that is the best way to build a strong progressive network. And if you look at any sort of emergent party or political movement in the country, they, besides the astroturfed ones that are funded by the Koch brothers, and arguably those ones do not have long shelf lives, as you've seen the Tea Party metastasize into the MAGA movement. Um, you you know the true long lasting sort of institutional change happens at the bottom because that is where
Yes.
you'll get the least resistance, and there you can build up the network and infrastructure necessary to take on bigger challenges. And
And
I
not even
think,
just building,
yeah.
like all of the innovative organizing tactics started at the local level and it trickled up.
Exactly. Local politics is the laboratory of democracy. This is where you can try to test things out. It's also a great place to recruit people that have skills necessary. I always say that it's important that that people contribute what they can to the movement, but there are some people that have very valuable skills necessary for a successful political movement.
What's that skill that they're missing that's keeping those organizations and the greater movement from winning those bigger fights?
One, it is sort of financial literacy, in terms of you're gonna have to have people involved that are good with money and good at fundraising. I mean, DSA is technically a nonprofit. It's a 501(c)(4), if I recall. They have a PAC, but it's not really active. It's mostly a 501(c)(4). So all of the skills necessary involved with having a successful nonprofit organization are seen in, successful DSA branches, having people who are good at resource development. I mean, I always harp on that as, that is the most valuable skill set in the nonprofit industry. And it's for good reason. Money is huge and you could do a lot. The more money you have, the more you can do. So having people who are good at that sort of thing is important, even though it's kind of boring and most people aren't interested in it. And
But what if it's someone that doesn't want to do that because they're not as social? Like what are some like back end skills that someone could do that aren't really front facing?
graphic design is huge. Gosh, graphic design, I mean, look at the Zora Mamdani campaign. That had great graphics. And I feel bad because I don't remember the artist's name, but I believe they're from Philadelphia. They're from Philly DSA that helped
That's
design
cool.
those. Yeah. Social media, just sort of like knowing how to navigate social media, I think is also important. It's, I'm not very social media savvy. Yeah, I'm followed by my friends and family, and that's about it. So knowing engage the algorithm is very important. Other sort of skills. I mean, it also just depends on the sort of issues that you're taking on. For instance, one of the things that we're interested in doing is that we want to do a creek, or for in Delcoese, a crick cleanup. So, having people that are familiar with, how to do that sort of physical labor involved with that, and the materials involved. But that's just one example. If you were, let's say, wanted to do a food drive, having people that are like maybe have skills involved with inventory and sort of warehouse distribution work is, yeah. I think everyone has something that they can contribute to the noise. I'll call it, to paraphrase the band the Front Bottoms. To contribute to the chaos.
How do you think Delco's progressive infrastructure looks like right now in terms of organizations, media, like we said, money, organizers?
It's getting there. There's potential. I don't think it's well defined. And a big part of that is because a lot of times Delco is seen as auxiliary to Philadelphia. And the reasons for that are understandable, but it's not reflective of the current material conditions or the material conditions that are developing. So we need more things that are focused specifically for the Delaware County area or have specific representation in Delaware County, and not just representatives from an organization that operates primarily out of Philadelphia. Which is why I keep bringing up Kyle. I think that he has done a lot of good work in terms of building the model for what it looks like to have organic grassroots Delco branded organizing, if that, in-house organizing on that level. It's not anywhere where it needs to be, which is a part of the work, and the work is never done. But we have potential. I mean, we're demographically changing very quickly. I forget the exact statistics, but I think in like about 10 years, our African American population has doubled. Yeah, we have 10% and growing population of people who are born outside of the United States. Hispanic demographics are growing. It is not the Delco of our parents, but it isn't the Delco that a lot of people have grown up with. Just hearing that you had to register Republican in order to quote get anything done, which, my family never really bought into. I mean, we said it, but like at the same time, my family was always very stubbornly Democrat. I grew up in Prospect Park, Norwood area. The Democrats did not have a chance there until like last year. But, that was always the thing. He's like, you gotta be a Republican in order to get anything done. I mean, Delco is still for, depending on the municipality, an incredibly white place, but it's becoming more diverse for sure. And, I was talking to one of our organizers who is from West Philadelphia, and we were talking about the racial disparities in terms of representation in the Delco Democratic Party and the actual population of Black people in Delco. And it's crazy. They should be more Black leadership in our Democratic Party here. And we're just looking at the voter turnout in Chester. Abysmal. Absolutely
What
abysmal.
was it?
I'm not good with just like spewing off numbers, but it is a lot lower than you would hope
Like
it would be.
ballpark, 10, 20?
Around there, yeah. And typically focused in older populations. But that is a huge area that is bluer than any other place in Delaware County. So it has the most Democrats, but the least turnout and the least representation. So
I mean,
one of the things.
how much of that do you think is them just thinking like the national Democrats are not working for me, so I'm just going to check out?
Yeah, although I would say that it isn't as specific as the National Democrats. It's more politics isn't working for me, which I think is something that we've seen repeatedly over the last couple presidential elections. The turnout keeps going up, but the apathy follows with it. So and that apathy is dangerous because it either leads people to not show up or just follow the first person that says that they'll do anything. And I think that's what we saw in 2024 is that, Trump, he was lying, but he said, he paid lip service to the things that people cared about and was able to tap into traditionally apathetic groups like young people. Like he got like a substantial, I don't think a majority or plurality, but a surprising number of young Black men. And I don't think that that has anything to do with his messaging about, the border or being tough on China really ringing true to them, but he was willing to say that we had a problem with affordability. Now he dropped that immediately, which anybody with would say, what does he say? It's a myth. Affordability is a myth. But
He
he
just
was
had
willing.
another quote where he said that he doesn't think of Americans' financial situations. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, complete 180, which anybody with half a brain could tell you, that was following along and really knew him, would say that, that was going to happen. And I want to retract half a brain because it's not fair because a lot of people are not informed because they're not that they don't care. It's not that they're dumb. They're just tired. I mean, it's hard to, work full time, not be able to afford groceries and now, gas.
Most people
And
are
also,
living. They're living their daily lives. They're not like
yeah.
focusing on politics.
Well, exactly. When you're not focused on survival, unless you're a total neurotic nerd like you or I, why would you devote that, why would you devote what's left of your precious free time to, to politics, to something that you don't feel like you have any control over, that doesn't reflect you, and will generally just get you upset, you know?
Which is a valid feeling too.
Yeah, for sure. I draw a lot of comparisons to how we're doing versus how China's doing, because I think that there's an interesting sort of dovetailing that happened around the first Trump administration, where I think the historical boomer sort of interpretation of how China is it's a dictatorship, peasant, country, underdeveloped. And ever since Deng Xiaoping, took power in China, and then following off him up to Xi Jinping now, they've been developing a lot, and they've really cut. And the Communist Party there has a very ingenious system of keeping the population under control, and that is meeting their basic needs.
Isn't that,
If
isn't
you
that
got-
kind of what the Republican Party machine did in Delaware County for like 150 years?
until it couldn't.
Yeah.
Until it couldn't, make yeah, exactly. Which is so interesting when you see how our government is acting now and saying that they don't care about the financial situations of the average citizens. That is
Yeah.
not a recipe for long-term success or stability in the nation. There are two different types of apathy, and I think that we're right now political apathy. Right. In the US, we have a very toxic one that's born out of exhaustion and sort of this idea, this alienation, this idea that we can't affect change. And then in China, they have a different kind of political apathy where they say, well, why do I care? All my needs are being met. And if we could get to a point where we can just have, I always say, it was like, I would love not to care. I would love to get to a point where I don't feel like I have to care about these things.
That
And
would
I
be
think
fantastic.
exactly, which is the shame, because I feel like that is what, like, the Bernie Sanders, hypothetical presidency would have been, is our negotiation away from being global hegemon in a way where we turn inward, we just take care of ourselves, and our systems are really just in place to just maintain that sort of satisfied, populace where our needs are met, and there's just enough equality to be interesting, inequality to be interesting, but not enough where people feel like it's, an existential threat to them. But, of course not. We didn't, we always have to pick the the harder path in this country.
Always the harder path.
Always.
Now, I wanted to quickly go back just in case if there's any people that do want to get involved. So you guys have gone through, DSA has gone through septic cuts, the Crozier closures. That sounded really weird. The Crozier
It always does.
closures.
Yeah, it always
Wow.
does. I have the same problem. Yeah.
Now, Swarthmore 9, what's the next action for DSA Delco? And how does somebody show up with DSA Delco or even join?
So you join, I'll start with the easy one, joining. You go on to the DSA's website, DSA, the America, or whatever the official website is called. And they have a thing where you can become a member. And when you become a member, you put where exactly you're living, and then they'll sort you in the back end and connect you with Philly DSA, who has monthly new members meetings, where then they will sort you into the Delco sort of branch, I guess. I don't know where I was
So
going with
the
that.
point of entry is the national DSA.
Yes,
Got
yes,
it.
because of the way it works. So it does cost money. It's dependent on your financial situation though. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't have money to spare, I only pay like $5 a month. It's not that big, and you could probably go lower. They do deferments based on income. So it does cost money to be a dues paying member, and although I want to be clear that that is not necessarily the thing that should keep you from being not wanting to be a dues paying member, should be the thing that keeps you from getting involved with Delco DSA. Because anybody can show up to our meetings. It's just that being a dues paying member allows you the opportunity to vote on measures and decide actions. And when you keep mentioning, it's like, well, what's next for Delco DSA? There's a couple things in the works, and we do have like a schedule of how we like release this sort of information. But the answer is always what our members decide. what the resident it's a democratic organization, and my role as leadership is to not really, tell people what it is that we need to focus on, but make sure that we have the resources and organization necessary to make it happen. So I'm almost kind of giving you like a little wink, like click to read more sort of thing. I don't want to give it all away. And if anybody's listening and you have something that you care about, that you would want to bring up, you think that this is something that the DSA should be involved with, please come to our meetings where they're usually the first Saturday of every month at 1 p.m. June is different though because of Pride is on the 6th. That's the first Saturday. So it's going to be on the 7th. And we have social media. We're on Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, or I'm sorry, X.
It'll always be Twitter.
It'll never be the everything app. And I don't think that we are on Facebook. And the only reason I don't think we're on Facebook, I'm not on Facebook, so I'm not really involved with that. But I think the only reason we're not on Facebook is because the previous iteration of Delco DSA made a page, and we've just never been able to get admin access. So I would say Instagram is where I think we shine the brightest.
TikTok or no?
Yeah, I think we do have a TikTok. Yeah, see, this is why I'm not in charge of social media.
I wouldn't be either. Don't hire me.
Yeah. So that is how you would hear about where we're having our meetings. We bounce around. We don't like to just like be in like one area of Delaware County because I don't know. I just don't want it to be like, well, Delco DSA lives in media or Delco DSA lives there. No, it's all we're across the county. Follow us on social media to see where the location of our next meeting is. I believe this next one is a private location, so you can come. You just have to like DM us and just say like, "Hey, I'm interested in showing up." And it just mainly show that like, no one's getting any bricks thrown through their houses. Although
Yes.
I don't think that's a major threat, but practicing good
You
safety is
never know.
important. Yeah,
You never know.
exactly. Yeah.
And before we wrap it up, what's one thing you wish Delco residents who, I guess, aren't really in tune and paying attention to politics, what's one thing that you wish that they understood about what's happening in the county right now?
I think, one thing. I think it's just important for people in general to just understand that if you want to see any sort of real change, you have to be involved. No one is there going to be able to do it for you. And the way that Delaware County is set up, and it's so atomized between the municipalities. A lot of people think of things on like the county level. You show up to the county council meetings and people have stuff that everyone's always ranting about stuff, but like you should really be more as involved, and that stuff's important, but you should be as involved with that as you are with what's going on in your local municipality. Yeah, just be involved. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that is because I feel like the vast majority of people are in line with what DSA is, stands for and is striving for. So I'm always excited to see more and more people get involved, because to me that means that we'll be getting closer to what it is we're trying to move for, which is a more equitable, a thriving Delaware County that protects its residents and provides for it. On Delaware County, I would say that on the whenever you show up to these meetings, Republicans and conservatives have a lot to say, and that's because they're currently on the outskirts of power in the county and in a lot of the municipalities. So what do you do when you don't have power? You chirp. Which is, DSA does a fair bit of chirping itself. But I think even when your quote unquote team is in power, you should still be chirping. You should still be paying attention to what they're doing and holding them to account. Anybody who has power should be criticized.
Yes.
And don't ever take, I can't do that or I don't have the power as an answer. Because if that was true, they wouldn't be in the seat. They would not have pursued that. Exact. I hate hearing that from different council members or different levels of municipalities. Like, well, I can't do anything about that. Well, what can you do? You can clearly do something, or else you wouldn't be there.
You can try, at least.
Well, yeah. Well, that's another thing I said. It's like, I will never fault a politician for trying and failing, but you have to try. Not trying is unacceptable, especially in this climate.
Completely agreed. Cool. Well, we've been speaking with Doug Leake, co-chair of DSA Delco. Doug, thanks so much for coming on. It was fantastic speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.